Hi, I'm Theo.
Hi, I'm Charlie.
I'm Alex.
And today we're talking about puberty myths for trans people. So puberty is a difficult time for most people, but particularly for trans people, mainly because that's when they start noticing that perhaps they're not happy with the gender they were assigned at birth.
Puberty is kind of when I saw like a fork in the road, guys going one way, girls going another, and I didn't really feel like I conformed to either at the time.
Puberty can be a minefield, even if you don't have any other issues to deal with. Being trans is just something that really complicates that. You can find it quite difficult to talk about the things that you're feeling.
So there's lots of myths when it comes to puberty. Now let's bust some of those ones about trans people. The first one is sexuality and gender is the same thing.
Really, your sexuality, your sexual preference is independent of your gender identity.
Sexuality is more who you like and gender is who you are.
How about the idea that, as soon as you go through puberty, it's like a switch and you're like, oh, I'm trans. Is there any validity to that?
People are discovering things about themselves all the time, and you might discover that you're trans in puberty. It might not become apparent to you until you're quite a bit older.
I know a lot of trans guys out there that haven't transitioned till they're in their 40s, and they're just as masculine as anyone else that's transitioned.
How about the idea that there are manly things and there are feminine things?
When I was first entering my transition, I suddenly felt really self-conscious of the things I like, because I felt like, I had to prove myself to my mum or my dad, so I'd stay completely away from anything sparkly or girly or frilly. And these days, you'll find me in my room late at night painting my boyfriend's toenails.
I grew up, I had two older brothers, I had like G.I. Joe and Star Wars and things like that. And I used to like playing soldiers and things that most little boys do. And yet at the same time, I felt that I was female.
I've always thought there's no boy things or girl things, they're just kind of you things, and you don't have to prove to anyone just based on what you like to do.
Another myth is that you can't stop puberty.
Through using hormone blockers, you can stop the onset of puberty.
If you decide you don't want to take them anymore, then changes will continue to happen.
You can go to a GP, a trained medical practitioner, and they can prescribe you hormone blockers, and that can give you a bit more control over that period in your life.
If that is something you decide to do and you act on it, great, but if you don't, it's really not a barrier to transitioning and also to transitioning successfully.
I didn't take blockers either. A lot of the time you have to have your parents' permission, and some people don't have that kind of support. If you continue with the hormone blockers, you can then go on to having treatment with hormone replacement. A lot of people think that hormones are a magic elixir, and that's not the case.
Hormones can help you feel more at ease, but ultimately happiness has to come from you.
I think it's also important to point out that some of this stuff you can't get until you're 18 years old.
Like Alex said, you shouldn't see hormones as the magic.
GPs are a bit tricky sometimes, aren't they?
When I first went to talk to a professional about it, my GP had no idea what I was talking about, and they referred me to the wrong place.
A lot of young people think, oh, I can't change my doctor. But if your doctor doesn't get you on a certain thing, you can ask for a different doctor, and you should.
It's good to make that point that, often GPs don't really have any experience of dealing with trans people.
Another myth is that puberty is irreversible.
Even if you've gone through puberty, you can still do a lot of things through use of hormones, through exercise, through the way you dress, the way you present.
Some people naturally transition.
If you look at it the right way, it can become quite a good period of time to experiment.
Maybe take small steps and try and find out what works for you. It's really about expressing your gender in the way that you feel comfortable. Hormones and surgery might play a part in that, but conversely, they might not.
Another puberty myth, if your voice breaks, you're not going to sound female.
Again, that is a myth. I can see why people would worry about that. Personally, it was a concern for me. Quite a bit of hard work, but also working with speech therapists, you can entirely learn to retrain your voice and speak in a way that sounds completely natural. My voice feels like my default voice. It's not like I'm having to think about doing it all the time.
So a young person might be worried that by being trans, it might hold them back with careers or success later in life. Is there any truth to that?
Trans people are just people. They're capable of the same things that anyone else is capable of. They have the same opportunities, the same rights.
It's all about just having the skill to do it, and if you're good at it, then obviously someone's going to hire you, whether you're trans or cis.
The Equality Act 2010 protects trans people from discrimination in the workplace.
So don't let being trans stop you from achieving your goals. I think one really important thing is that you mustn't feel alone. For me, I felt very alone at times. I felt very self-conscious about talking to anyone, in fact, a doctor, friends, parents.
Transitioning is a very big thing, and it's going to be for the rest of your life, so you're going to need people there with you.
And I think now there's a lot of support out there. There's things like YouTube, online communities, forums.
Being trans is a really complex thing, and everyone goes through it a different way. Don't give up, do your research, and prove them wrong.
Yeah, stick to your guns and be true to yourself.
Thank you so much for coming in, Alex and
Thank you.
Charlie, and I'll see you next week. Bye.